Hello, I hope everyone is healthy, safe, and well. I am Jacoria Borders, a program specialist here at the Blank Foundation, coming back for part 2 of our Racial Justice and Democracy series. We're back again this week with another special guest and grantee to highlight their work, where we are, and how far we have to go. For today's discussion, we have with us Reverend James Major Woodall, the president of the Georgia NAACP. James has been on the front lines in Brunswick, Georgia, after the unjust murder of Ahmaud Arbery, and is in community seeking justice for many other families that fall victim to similar symptoms of the same cancer that plagues our country and our state. James wears many hats and has championed issues from criminal justice reform to voting rights and so much more. He is a native of Riverdale, Georgia, an 8-year Army veteran, youngest person ever elected state president in NAACP history. Without further ado, I want to hop right in with Major to talk about why youth advocacy and activism are so important to our society. So, James, good to chat with you twice in 1 week. How are you? How are you quarantining?
I'm not quarantining, but I'm doing well, and this has been a very not exciting, but a very adventurous season, and it's been one that, in many respects, in a real sense, really challenges who we are, who we have known ourselves to be, and ultimately where we believe we can go as a people. And it takes these kinds of defining moments for us to be able to walk out of the darkness and into the light. So I'm grateful and honored to be able to discern what needs to be done so that we can make it to that point.
Awesome. When we first met, I believe it was in Augusta, and you were working with Francis Johnson at the time. And then you moved to Atlanta and started working with Rep. Miriam Paris, and then attending ITC. And framing the conversation today around youth advocacy, tell us more about the NAACP for our viewers who may not know, and why you got involved at an early age, and why you chose to lead.
So NAACP is, we do 3 things historically, and we do them well. We do direct action, which is the marching, the protests, the sit-ins, the demonstrations. We do public policy advocacy, which is, fighting for legislation changes, policy changes, whether it's through the General Assembly, it's through county commissions, it's through the city councils, or even through Congress. And we have Washington's Bureau, who focuses on the federal policy. The states focus on state policy, and our local units focus on local policy. And then the final thing, we do litigation. When all else fails, we have to use the leg of litigation to really reinforce the very constitutional values to which we claim we uphold. And when there are policies that are unjust and or incongruent with the constitutional policy that we've outlined as the established framework of our democracy, then we use the courtrooms to be able to justify why we must change or why we must act. And so, I often say, and the elders often say, there are only 2 people, especially in rural Georgia, there are 2 entities that people call on when they get in trouble, and they call on the name of Jesus, and they call on the NAACP. And so, I got involved in this organization because it was so established. People knew what the NAACP stood for. They stood for the exact same thing that I stand for, which is ensuring that every single human being has access to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And what that looks like in real time is having no institutions or no policies that are disenfranchising our communities, that there's no experiences of disparity, regardless if it's through health, through education, through employment and labor, whether it's through the criminal justice process, whether it's through elections. And so there are so many things that are falling deficient, if you will, within our institutional level of community. And our job is to really bring light to them, but also to work together to ensure that those disparities are no longer in practice.
Awesome. So, we all know the NAACP has helped make a lot of progress in our state. What change do you still see what change do you still want to see when it comes to voting?
Well, currently right now, we want everybody to be able to have access to the ballot box, from felons who, are in prison for the smallest of crimes. We have some people voting, in jails. We got nursing homes and those kind of things. But accessibility is so important, especially as they return back to society. We also want there to be every single resident gets a application to vote by mail. Especially during a public health pandemic where we have, the highest offices in the land, jeopardizing the very process of the USPS, which is ingrained in the Constitution. It's ingrained in the Constitution, and we're having conversations about whether or not there's going to be an intentional sabotaging of their budget, of their ability to be able to just deliver mail. And we've seen a delay in mail over the past several months. And so this is not a new problem. And so we have very serious challenges that we are facing today, not just as it relates to elections, but literally as a nation. If we're not able to maintain the very fragmented, but the very foundation of who we are as a United States of America, then we really must renegotiate if we are a country at all. And so that's what we're fighting for as it relates to electoral process, accessibility and integrity, and also due process.
So digging a little deeper, what, obviously you're in South Georgia right now. And so as all this stuff is happening in real time, what are you telling, folks that you come in contact with who may be fearful to vote by mail at this stage, but also fearful to go to the polls? Like, what is your recommendation? What are you telling folks?
We're telling people that they need to, one, make sure that they have a plan. Make sure that you have a plan on how you and your family will be voting. Do not wait till the last minute to decide on what you're going to do. We need people to be thinking about this now. If you want to vote by mail, go ahead and request one now, because it's going to take a while to get to you. And it's August, mid-August now. You're not going to probably get it until September, because I think, by law, you can't send it out before a certain time period. But go ahead and request one now. You'll get it, as early as you can get it, and send it back immediately. If you plan to vote in person, vote early. Go to these precincts that are not long line waited, experiences, but rather you're able to just go in, vote, and go out. So many options that we have available for us, but it's important that we do not wait to the last minute, and that we are able to plan.
Awesome. So why do you think there's about, I'd say roughly a little bit over 300,000 unregistered African-American voters in Georgia, and how can this be rectified?
Well, it goes back to the disenfranchisement. The very franchise of electoral process here, in the nation, is not a old one. African Americans just literally got their right to vote, and that even is being taken away from us right now. We can't talk about the 304, I think, thousand unregistered African Americans without talking about how many are being taken off the ballot, off the voter registration rolls. And so part of that is the policies that we continue to see embedded within our very framework of this society that we live in. We got to address those. And then we talk about re-entry into society. How do we encourage and how do we educate and empower returning citizens who have served their times in prison for one reason or another? How do we educate them on their process? We still have felons. We still have returning citizens who believe that because they are felon, that they cannot vote. That's a part of that 304,000. And so we have to do a better job of being proactive and going after policies that inform our decisions as citizens. And then the final thing I would say is that there are some people who just simply don't know, right? If we had policy that made it where every single person who was 18 years of age or older would be automatically registered, regardless of where they live, regardless of how much money they make, regardless if they're employed or not employed, if they're black, white, if they're gay and straight, Protestant, Catholic, or no religion at all. Every single Georgian who is eligible to vote should be on the voter registration roll.
That is the going consensus. 100% wholeheartedly agree with you. We've talked with a couple experts already, and that has been a topic of discussion in previous conversations. Look, we both have knocked on doors across the state, but I want to know your take and what you say to those individuals who feel like their vote isn't going to make a difference, it doesn't count.
Well, what I would say is it depends on, I guess, what you're looking for as an effect to your participation in the process. Voting is not transactional, and neither is it the end all be all. Voting is a simple tool. And if you're telling me that the house is on fire and you have a tool to put the fire out, but you have one that says, well, this only takes out one part of the fire, you're not going to be able to tackle the entire thing. We have so many tools at our disposal, and we must use them all. The president is the only thing on the ballot. You have state representative and state senate races. You have district attorney races. You have sheriff's races. You have, some even have county commission races. And so all politics start local, and the people that are on the ballot, like coroner and aldermen and all these kinds of races, those are oftentimes decide about dozens of votes. And so if you are saying your vote doesn't matter and the person next to you is saying your vote doesn't matter, then your voice is silenced in these local races, that your vote could actually make the difference. I've seen races sometimes come as close as 7, 4, and even 2 votes of disparity, within difference. And so we have to participate, but we have to also acknowledge that voting, though essential, though necessary, is insufficient. It's so insufficient, because once election day is over, we then must do the really hard work of holding these elected officials accountable. Now, you can't hold them accountable. And some people always say you don't have a voice if you don't vote. I don't agree with that. But it invalidates your accountability if that person can literally pull up your voting record and see that you didn't participate. And it really invalidates your experience. And we don't want to invalidate our experiences. We want to lift them up. We want to embody the very framework of why we are in this process to begin with. And if we don't vote, then it makes it very, very difficult for us to advocate.
So putting on the racial justice lens of this, tell us about some of the injustices you've seen families experience in your work with the Georgia NAACP. And if you even want to reference the work that you're doing right now, literally in Southwest Georgia, just tell us about what you're seeing with the families.
So we have Ahmaud Arbery, who is Brunswick, Georgia. We have Kelsey Rayner, which is Baxley, Georgia. We have Rayshard Brooks, and Sequoia Turner, which is Atlanta, Georgia. We have Kobe Edwards, which is Cuthbert, Georgia. We have Julian Roosevelt Edward Lewis, which is Sylvania, Georgia. And now I'm here in Statesboro, where there's a Black man who is literally sitting in the Bullitt County Jail, awaiting trial, awaiting a hearing for defending himself and his girlfriend, who was just so happened to be a white woman. And they were accosted and almost ran off the road. And in defense of himself and his girlfriend, who was called by those who were in the other vehicle the N-word lover, he fires one shot. And unfortunately, that shot lands in that vehicle and kills one of the passengers. Instead of him being able to claim self-defense, as many others do, he's now being tried for murder. And our job is to get him home on Tuesday. And that's hopefully what we're going to be doing. So when we talk about racial justice, we don't have to look out to Minneapolis and Louisville and Cleveland and Cincinnati and Houston and all these other places. We are having these situations happen right here. And in a real sense, we're in a state of emergency where we have, at least on Friday, I haven't even had the opportunity to look at the numbers, since, but On Friday, we were at 57 officer-involved shootings. And in context, we had 59 in all of 2019. 57. And so every single family that we touch and talk to and stand with in solidarity, looking into their eyes and seeing the pain and the grief and the shame that they feel, they now experiencing what no one should. You know, death is natural as well as human grief. But what is not natural is the injustice that continues to labor within our communities that claims the lives of so many among us. And that is not, I believe, the will of God. And so we are doing the work of the Spirit, I believe, to really renegotiate our relationship to this thing called violence and this thing called police and this thing called racism and white supremacy, but most of all, the dehumanization. Because if you're not human beings, regardless if you're a citizen or not, if you're not human beings, then you don't have access to life. You don't have access to liberty. And so it's been a journey. It's been a journey, but that's what we're called to do, is to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly. So I'm honored to be in this space and do this work, but I'm challenged because it keeps happening over and over again. We are done dying. We're done burying our loved ones, our brothers and our sisters in community, and having to stand in solidarity so we can get justice when the process should work. But unfortunately, every single part of this process has demonstrated over the past 6 months that it just doesn't work for all. As John Legend in Common says, justice for all just ain't specific enough.
So in that, and you're doing some incredible and powerful work, James, and just thank you for everything that you're doing. But I would ask, for all those listening, how can they, at an individual level, or if they're part of another nonprofit organization or a philanthropic organization, how can they help you? How can they help you help us? What can we do to support the NAACP?
So one, I would urge on an individual level to become a member of an organization that is on the front line doing the real work. It's important to value the voices of those found not only within the marching, but that are also identified as grassroots. If we are only listening to the talking heads of the national scene, we're not actually putting our ears to the ground and listening to those who are there, then I think we would be able to be in well position to respond to these challenges, because they are happening all over the state. They're not just happening in Atlanta. They're not just happening in Statesboro, Savannah. They're literally happening all over. But it's not always found in the way of extrajudicial killings or racial violence. It's also in the form of access to education, when our teachers are literally being discriminated against. They're being forced to purchase school supplies in a way that really is not congruent with their salaries. They don't get paid a lot, but they're spending their own hard-earned money to ensure that the classroom is a safe space and an accessible space to all students. And so how do we support those in our community already? It comes in the form of access to healthcare, access to mental health resource. There are so many issues that are happening, access to clean water. And so identify the issues in your specific locale that you're able to address these issues head on. As organizations, we've founded the coalition called the Just Georgia Coalition. And we're opening that coalition up to statewide partners, particularly outside of Metro Atlanta. And if you are a part of an organization that is in these communities, we want to be able to partner and stand with you to reinforce and support you, to help build capacity if necessary, to train on the various issues that you may not be as exposed to. But then we're also here to learn from, because only when we stand together, only when we fight together, only when we work together, only when we serve together do we win. And Lord knows I believe we will win, but we can only do it when we're together. So those are the two specific things that people can do to help the NAACP, but also just because it's not just about the NAACP, it's about the people. And so those are the two specific things that I would recommend in this moment so that people can assist and do the work.
Amazing. And now we all know that rooted in our country's tapestry and history and foundation, there has never been any major movement that didn't involve young people. And in fact, quite frankly, I mean, I don't know if we consider us young at this point anymore, but we know that you were very young when you began this journey. And we know that a lot of work of the NAACP is carried out by young people. And so in that, I would just like you to kind of explain to our audience or, inform them on all the great work the young folks within the NAACP are doing at a high level.
Well, what I would say is that most of the work that is being done by young people. And I sing praises to the Most High for our young leader, State President Mark Fenoy, who is a Spelman grad, and she leads our youth and college division. And what they're doing is really admirable in many ways, from voter engagement and voter mobilization to economic empowerment workshops in town halls, and being able to work in the halls of the legislature as staff, to be able to get the real policy experience of creating a new narrative on what could be possible, educating college students all over the state on various issues of interest, really reinvesting in our infrastructure. And so being on the front line, some go all the way up to Louisville and Minneapolis, and they've asked me to come, and I tell them, well, I'm the state president, so I can't really leave our jurisdiction, especially when we have so much going on ourselves. So they've been able to take the show on the road as I try to, take care of home. But the work that they're doing is so tremendous and so inspiring, and it motivates me in many ways to keep going. So we want to support our youth and college division, our young people, our leaders there. And yeah.
Awesome. So for the last question, I want to ask you, tell us about the first time you voted and what emotions it evoked in you, and the memories you may have about it, or why was it powerful to you?
No, I really, I can't remember when the first time it was that I voted. I know it sounds so asinine, but it just wasn't like a symbolic moment for me. I just felt it was my duty. I always would vote in person. I don't think I've ever voted by mail. I've always voted in person. And matter of fact, if it was the first time I voted, I think it was for Bernie Sanders in 2007 or 2008, one of them, I can't remember. No, that was 2012. See, I told you I can't remember. It's been so many years, because I literally vote on every election cycle. Matter of fact, in all transparency, I think there's only been one election that I have not voted in, and it was a runoff election because there was nobody on the ballot.
That's your superpower.
Yeah, I was in South Georgia, and there was literally nobody on the ballot. So I was like, why am I showing up to vote? But yeah, voting as a franchise, not as a franchise, but as an experience to me, it's just a very routine must do that, don't really evoke a lot of emotions in me. But what I do, recognize is that for so many people, that process is so sacred. And they have, memories of, I was here. But for me, it's important for us just to participate and do our part.
Awesome. Well, James, thank you for your work. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your friendship. And most importantly, thank you for joining us today. We are forever grateful for the work that you are doing. We expect great things to come from the Georgia NAACP, but also from you. And so just thank you for all that you continue to do